So I've been working on these books. I love Explain Pain. I think it's an excellent resource.
Thanks,
I work with children in pain, and I've been thinking for a long time that wouldn't it be great to have like not only a simpler version of these kind of ideas, the target concepts, but a version that's developmentally appropriate for, say, like a 6 to 10 year old. So they're like old enough to understand, but not able to think abstract thoughts.
Sure.
And so if you think about some of the ideas in Explain Pain, some of them are quite abstract. And so for us to give that to kids, it doesn't make sense. I just wonder if you had to pick, what do you think is that like key pain science idea that if we were going to try and transform the whole next generation, what would it be? Is there a number one?
This is a little bit like your one thing, all right?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd only looked at, I'm no expert. You're an expert on this group of people, 6 to 10-year-olds. But in answer to your question, I guess it's not a one-defined thing. The thing that excites me the most from the work that I've been involved with is the transformation in resilience and self-management of understanding that actually we are a highly complex and highly effective healing recovery machine. We're not a machine, recovery organism. And I guess having the understanding that pain is a complex protective feeling and that your system learns. I think they're the two things that have shown the biggest impact in our work. When I look at Hayley Leake's, she's really asked adolescents slightly older than your group, what are the most important things for you? And they match pretty similarly the adult work, but I think they are sort of refined and getting a bit more simple. So maybe it's really a case of people like you working with these kids and with your clinical understanding and working out, okay, so what will be the game changer?
Yeah,
for these
and so that's exactly what we've done. We've built 5 books, and each one only covers one kind of learning outcome. And the idea is that we can then test and say, okay, let's give a classroom this one and see what's understood and not what's misunderstood. Because this is the thing, like a lot of people can go, oh, that sounds nice, but it doesn't apply to me. Or they completely misunderstand it. You're saying it's all in my head and these kinds of tricky things. So this is this tension we've had of trying to not oversimplify, but to simplify at an appropriate level. So working, rather than trying to go Wall and Melzack, Explain Pain, Zoe and Zach's Pain Hacks, we're trying to go from the kids' language to start at the low level and work our way up.
I wonder actually if you will end up finding, as you get all this data from these beautiful looking books, I haven't seen inside them.
That's okay. Well, I
sure
can't wait to show you.
I'm sure they're excellent. I mean, I love your work. But what we might find is that actually they're appropriate for much older people.
Yeah.
They're appropriate for parents.
I didn't want to say this. I was actually talking to a clinician earlier, we were filming, and I think that there's adults out there who love this sort of stuff. So you could reach for it and say, look, this actually doesn't need to be this complex. There's a kid's book about it. Let me show you. And it becomes more accessible. I don't know. We haven't explored that either. So there is a study in that, and there's someone going to look at that in parents. But yeah, it's an interesting question to go, can framing a resource as this is easy for you, does that make it more accessible to the learner? And I'd imagine you would feel that with Explain Pain compared to a typical textbook, right? Like it's more accessible because there's drawings.
I think so. I mean, it's, as you know from this journey of yours, it's about more than the art. I mean, the art's important, and I think for Explain Pain that was pretty transformative, I think, because of the artist. It wasn't Dave and I doing any of that drawing, but the language is really important, isn't it? And I know I've heard you speak about this and talking about getting language that's developmentally appropriate as well is really important. I'm just thinking more about your question about the quasi one thing, and it just makes so much sense to me, Josh, that if a young person, an 8-year-old kid, understands that when they're in pain, that's a valid feeling to have. And that's a core understanding that my pain is valid, but it's not a marker of the state of my tissues. Yeah. Now, that's the sort of language we use in adults, right? It clearly won't be right for your group. But if that was a conviction, I think validation is a big deal. I'm learning a lot about this from people like Adele O'Hagan, actually, Hayley Leake. Validation is a big deal. And when we look at our data, validation keeps coming up as being linked to recovery. And that's a really profound statement. Validation keeps coming up as being linked to recovery, not just to thanks for validating, but actually improving outcomes.
So it's not just a nice story, it's a story that they can buy into, like they can be a part of that understanding.
I think so. We don't have empirical data to support what I just said. It's my gut feeling, and my soft interpretation of the data is that validation is key. And if we can get 10-year-olds going into adolescence with a core conviction that their feelings are valid and pain is complex.
It's complicated,
what you eat's relevant, or how you're feeling about life, your day at school is relevant. And that's not confronting for kids. That would be a great outcome.
So we're going to schools and we're testing this at the moment, this idea of, because we're trying to change curriculums, but there's lots of barriers to that. But the idea is, so in school curriculums, they're pushing towards neuroscience and they're pushing towards resilience and well-being. And our pitch to them is that pain is like the perfect vehicle to introduce that. Like, teachers don't want to talk about anxiety because they're not health professionals, and that's what they say in the surveys we've done. And they worry that they'll come across like accusing that someone's faking it or something like that. Whereas pain is a more relatable experience, and then just translating from, the short-term pain experience to a long-term pain is less of a stretch. And so we're thinking that could be, anyway, I've got a PhD student who's going to look at this, like a healthy kid's learning about this stuff, would that help reduce stigma in the future? So you mentioned if healthy kids learn about pain science early, it could prevent potentially reduce the prevalence of pain, like the Slip, Slop, Slap campaign reduced the prevalence of skin cancer. But I think there's also something about stigma. Like if I haven't had chronic pain when I was a kid, but the guys in my class who did, I reckon I would have behaved differently. Like I would have shown more empathy. I would have validated their feelings more if I had have also understood it. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm just interested.
I don't know either. And I know that there are very impressive people exploring these things at different age groups. Sometimes I wonder actually if very young kids actually understand it more accurately than they do later in life. Sometimes empathy for the experience of having an injury seems, in my limited experience with kids, I've got two and I've been around lots, but I'm a better teacher, I don't study them or anything. But kids seem to see someone else suffering and have empathy for that and validate that and don't spend any time thinking, that's not bad enough for your feelings. And then somehow between very young kids and adults, we seem to lose that. I don't know.
It's like we learn to not.
I want to keep saying, I'm no expert. This is my observation. And I just wonder if some of the power of something like what you're doing may actually be in communicating to all the people around the kids. These young kids, maybe younger than 6, I don't know, they've actually got a bit of it right. They understand, they might not understand, but they have an embedded somatic knowledge of pain, different way of knowing, a somatic way of knowing things that is actually more aligned with what pain scientists are discovering over time.
So like maybe we're socially conditioning people to respond to pain in an unhelpful way, like at the moment, potentially. We'd obviously need to test that.
I'm sure, without any empirical data. But I have a strong conviction that social factors influence when we feel pain and what we do about it and what it feels like. And I have a strong suspicion that very young children have this other way of knowing that we're just born with, that's been honed over the course of evolution, that might actually have more in common with what cutting-edge pain science tells us about how pain works. And then we dismantle that because we live in this biomedical structure and way of thinking about everything. And kids don't, right? They don't live in that world. They've got to learn it, and they learn relationships. They go to the doctor or the physio or whoever who talks about things in this way, conceptualises it this way. And could it be, Josh, that actually kids are ready for this information But as soon as they start getting socialised through all these systems, we slowly dismantle their intuitive, biologically embedded way of knowing stuff.
Yeah.
So that when they are in a challenging situation, say with pain or with anxiety, or they're still sad, worried, they're hurting, they're frightened, and we construct that in a way that promotes or that demotes recovery and promotes care pathways. And I mean, I don't know, but my suspicion, it'd be great to see data coming out on your books to see, we might find that 6-year-olds, yeah, of course, I get it, makes sense. What's unusual about this? And their parents are going, what are you, some sort of weirdo? Because their parents have been dismantled.
Yeah, and I think, it's that idea of kind of scaffolding learning over the course of childhood makes more sense than trying to go, hey, we know 100 million good things, you need to know all of these things, and probably 99 of them aren't helpful. Start with where they're at. And so that's my line of research, and that's where I'm heading, which is cool. So, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. Get the data.
Yeah.
And let's see. I mean, it would be great if we could turn off the tap
early
of the the numbers are compelling. Get 20% of the 20% and protect them from a future chronic pain episode. You've saved billions for the economy, and that's what it's all about. The economy.
I wanted the conversation to go towards the stigma stuff because I don't care about that. But it's interesting, even that some of the public health work that we're looking at the moment, we're on a thing together about that, is you need to change things at a policy level, at all these different levels in order to create mass conceptual and behaviour change. It's not just ground up people learning, or it's not just change the policy and be dictators. You've got to kind of meet them at all these different levels. And so I think it is a huge uphill battle, and I don't think for a second that one resource can fix all of that. But I'd like to think that we can make incremental steps towards improving the quality of life of humans, hopefully. We'll see how we go.
Absolutely, Josh. I totally agree with the intent of saying, we're not going to change everyone here, but if we can change this, and that's, for example, these are conversations I have internally often. What's my skill set? What's my interest?
Well.
I'm going to try and have an influence in that tiny little segment of the pie. And then we rely on the rest of the pie being taken up with people with different skill sets and expertise and passions and all that sort of stuff.
Great. And I'm glad you didn't try and become a paediatric physio now, and I'm going to stay in my lane. No, that's great.
Back off, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you.
See ya.